Well, we're very, very, very lucky to have my very good friend Sherry Fuller here today to do a bit of an interactive workshop on one of my own favourite topics, universal basic income. Don't worry if you know absolutely nothing about universal basic income. That's kind of the point of this workshop. I've been very lucky in previous to actually deliver probably the workshop that Sherry's about to do with Sherry at various different things. And so, yeah, everybody, Sherry Fuller.
I think the last speaker was a bit taller than me. John Fuller, no relation. There's lots of us Fullers around in this part of the world. So, hello everyone. Thank you for hanging around for my talk. It'll be a bit of me talking, and it will be a bit of you talking to each other, because I don't know that I'm that interesting to keep listening to. So we're going to talk today about universal basic income. Do people know a little bit about this? Some people? Few hands waving there, few things. So there's going to be a little bit about what it's all about and what the benefits are of doing it, and a little bit of conversation amongst everyone here about what we could practically do to make it a reality. Can everybody see this all right? Yeah, thank you. Is that James at the back there, heckling? Did you bring your rotten fruit? I'll find out, marvellous. So this isn't a new concept. Martin Luther King was talking about this. I'm now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by a now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. But it even goes back to the ancient Greeks, the notion of people having some kind of income. So it's not anything new, which can be something a bit frustrating about it, because we've been talking about it for centuries. But still, it's not been widely implemented. Trials happen at local level, which is something I'm going to go and talk about, but as policy, no one has yet adopted it. Although I am pleased to see that not only in the UK have we got the Green Party championing it, and I think Labour was talking about it as well, but one of the presidential candidates in the US, or he hasn't been selected as the Democratic representative, unfortunately, but he had it as one of the big things that he was running on. So it is out there as something people are taking seriously. So it's variously called basic income, citizens' basic income, universal basic income, lots of different phraseology. A lot of what I'm going to talk about, it comes from my conversations with Malcolm Torrey, who set up the Citizens Income Basic Trust charity back in the 80s, and he's been slogging away trying to convince parliamentarians that this is a good thing to do, and he's still going. So a lot of my slides are informed by my conversations with him and the things he's written. So he talks about citizens' basic income, but it's basically this: an unconditional, automatic and non-withdrawable income for each individual as a right of citizenship. There are different ways to implement it. Some people, it's literally every citizen, including children, but they get a much smaller amount, and it changes depending on where you are in life. But this one, on a slight tack here, picture of my dog in the snow. My dear friend Graham, who'll be coming along later to do some permaculture stuff, and that's worth staying for because he's brilliant. I remember being in the pub. I shouldn't say this because it wasn't this pub. It was the West Road Tap, and it was snowing. Last year, the year before, whenever we last had snow. And Graham made the observation that when it snows like this, it feels like it's always been snowing and it always will snow. But then before that, we had the rain, and when it was raining, it felt like it's always been raining and it will always be raining. One of the things people say about basic income is, well, that can never happen. That's not possible, because we're so used to things being the way things are. But just because things have always been this way up till now doesn't mean that it can't be different. It's just that we sometimes seem to lack imagination as a species, us humans. We get very accustomed to the status quo, and we think, well, it's always been snowing, so it will always snow. There was a time we didn't have the NHS. There was a time we didn't have the welfare state. There was a time when society looked very different. So it is doable. Even if it seems very radical, it is doable. And that's just an opportunity for me to include my dog, really. I'm quite surprised this presentation hasn't got kittens in it, because I usually get them in there somewhere as well, but I've neglected to this time, so apologies for the lack of kittens. But there is a dog. Dogs make everything better. Where's this? Anybody know where that is? Loudly from the back. James? Where's that?
Sweden.
Ah, come on. Nobody recognised this. Well, it's famous for greening a city. It's amazing. Singapore. So I actually, I'd heard about this before, but I stumbled upon it recently, having accidentally watched a programme about Michael Portillo and trains. It just kind of came on and I was just watching the telly and I got drawn in. And he's doing this sort of journey around Asia by train, which is quite interesting in and of itself. But he went to Singapore and he was talking about how it was one person's vision. I forget whether it was the mayor or whoever looks after the city of Singapore, who decided this is how things are going to be. So it wasn't a vote, it wasn't put to committee, he just decided that he was going to green the city. And it's just absolutely phenomenal. I can't remember what the train journey thing is. It's something like Michael Portillo's Great Train Journeys or something. And it's on quite recently, so it's out there. It's worth looking up. But they've reduced car use, so they've got lots of car parks now where they're growing food for citizens. And they're using all kinds of really innovative techniques. This on my right here, and they've got like this drain pipe system with plants growing in little clay balls. I'm looking at James over there, who probably knows more about that kind of stuff because he does permaculture-y things. But they're growing the food in the city for the citizens using these really innovative ways. And as somebody, when she was explaining how this works, said that by using this system, they don't have standing water, therefore they don't have malaria-carrying mosquitoes. So basically every available space is used to grow things. So my point here really is just because something doesn't seem attainable doesn't mean it's not attainable. Everything always seems impossible until it's done, so said Nelson Mandela. So things can be different, and we can learn from those examples of where people have decided to do things differently. I'm sure you're really aware of this, John, this model in Singapore. Well, I only kind of watched the programme with Michael Portillo and thought, wow! So, you know, I had kind of heard of it before, but it's worth looking at and being inspired by, because we can do things very differently. And sometimes it just comes to one person or a small group of people with a vision. So just a few things about the core fundamentals of what universal basic income is and how it ought to work. It's unconditional. It might vary with your age, because if you're like 8, you probably don't need quite as much money as if you're 28. You probably haven't got a mortgage when you're 8, wouldn't have thought. But otherwise, there are no conditions. It's not means tested. It's automatic. You get it paid weekly or monthly, depending on the system. Non-withdrawable. Doesn't get taken away if you start working. The idea is that it is just basic. It covers your basic living costs. So it doesn't disincentivise work. It just gives us more opportunities to do other things too. So if you're quite happy to subsist on a very small amount of money, because you might be doing lots of other things that are of great value to society that don't pay money, and you want time to do that, you might not need very much money to live on. But if you do want your luxuries, like your fancy vegetarian shoes or your nice holidays, then you work too, and you top up the basic income. And where trials have been run, it doesn't stop people going out to work. It just means that people are also free to set up their own businesses, which can take time. And you know, it's difficult to be working and doing that. It means that you've got more time to volunteer, to do good things in your community, which lots of people here will be doing. And caring, obviously, it means if you're a carer and you want to spend time looking after someone, you've got time to do that. It's individual, it's paid to everyone. And this is important as well, actually, is some of the things that have been written about this is it empowers women, or it empowers people who might find themselves trapped in an abusive relationship. Not just women, but globally, you know, that is something that happens where women are very reliant on their husband or their partner to be bringing in the income, and that can sometimes mean that they're trapped in a relationship they don't want to. I'm not just thinking in the UK, work I've done in Zambia, that is the model. You go to school for a certain while if you're a female, and then you get married very young, and that's then your life. You don't get much opportunity. This is in the rural parts of Zambia where I was working, and that's something that we'll see throughout the world. So if it's paid to everyone, that gives people much more agency and empowers people who might otherwise be trapped by their circumstances. And it's a right. So if we were to do it here, everyone would receive it. Everybody that's legally here would receive it. And there was, in the citizens' basic income model, it does suggest due to after a minimum period of residency here. When you're a UK citizen, you get it. So those are some of the fundamentals. Any questions so far? I'm hoping I'm not sending you all to sleep. You're still with me? Good, good. And as I've kind of touched on this already, but it's about valuing things other than paid work. I mean, I'm a real believer in this. As somebody who considers herself a freelance human, or actually I'd go a bit further than that and probably say a feral human, somebody who rejects the 9 to 5 and wants to kind of live my life doing lots of different things, some that earn money and some that don't. And I know from people I know, some of whom are in this room, there are so many ways to contribute to our society and to our world. It's not all about earning money, which is often earning money for other people so they can have their fancy cars and holidays and they have all the free time while people are working 40 plus hours a week, sometimes in multiple jobs. And I really believe life should be about living. We're here for a short time. We should be able to enjoy ourselves and enjoy the planet and help one another and just be human beings and not be working all the time. It's one of the reasons that I'm a real big evangelist for this idea. So going to school, I mean, that's another thing that happens. People will often, when they're given the time and the opportunity, will enrich themselves. They'll learn things they always wanted to learn. They'll study things they always wanted to study. So it frees you up to do that. Now, this is something that we've had come up when we've been doing talks about this. Well, this is all very well, but if people are free to do whatever they want to do, who's going to do the jobs that nobody wants to do? But that's exactly one of the arguments that was used when people wanted to abolish slavery. It was that, but our economy will collapse. Who will do these jobs that the slaves are doing? We must have slaves. We couldn't possibly live without slaves. And to me, this is the same argument, because at the moment, a lot of the jobs that nobody wants to do are quite exploitative. So I say we might not have slaves anymore. Yeah, we do. We have modern day slavery and we have all sorts of horrible things happening with human trafficking. But we also have exploited workers who are low paid, on 0 hours. They have no job security. A lot of people are doing that kind of work now. So I don't think you should use who will do the jobs nobody wants to as a reason to not have a basic income. I think we just have to think how we do that. I think, for one, people will do the jobs nobody wants to do because people will want extra income on top of their basic income. So I think those jobs will get done. And if it is the case that we've got a different model of society now, maybe we'll have to think about a different way of doing those jobs, like rubbish collection and caring for people and so on. But I actually think that some people will choose to do those things anyway, as long as they're paid a fair wage. Basic income doesn't exist on its own. It exists alongside a decent living wage and still welfare for people that will never have the opportunity to work. Any questions so far? James wants to say something. He looks very keen to say something. Say a thing.
You're saying about, people not wanting to do those certain jobs. One of the things that advocates of universal basic income say is that actually having this kind of model whereby people are forced into doing a job that they don't want to do actually ends up in the resulting pushing working standards higher, because suddenly companies will have to start making those jobs that nobody wants to do pay well. They have to look at the health and safety of those kind of workplaces as well, push those kind of working standards higher. They have to compete with jobs that people would normally want to do. So actually, as a net benefit, the universal basic income pushes people's happiness and satisfaction up immeasurably as well. Because when you've got a job that actually wants to keep you, because they know that at any moment you have the freedom and the independence to go, you're not treating me right as a worker, I'm going to leave. It forces those companies to actually start treating their staff members, almost like a cooperative model. You cannot exist without your workers, so treat your workers well. You start working together. It's just another point.
Yeah, really, really good point. Absolutely go along with that. As a feral human, I've had times where I'm fairly affluent because I've got a contract that pays me quite nicely, and I've got times where I've been completely broke. And at those times, I have taken on low-paid jobs just to have some money coming in. And it's amazing the difference in how you're treated. If you're a low-paid worker, well, my experience, and I know it's different, some places are a lot better to their lower-paid workers than others, but I wasn't trusted. Anything I had, it was in a care home, I won't name it. But if we wanted to have breakfast with our residents, we had to pay for a slice of toast, we had to pay for a cup of tea. I was told I couldn't charge my phone at lunchtime because that was stealing electricity. I had to work really hard and really long hours for really low money. And that's quite a common experience. And it's not like that in the higher paid jobs that I have. I have flexible working, I'm trusted, I can work from home and they just expect I'll get the work done. We need to stop exploiting people. All jobs are valuable. It's outrageous, really, that people doing the most fundamental jobs in society, like cleaning our streets and cleaning the hospital and working in care homes, are paid so little. We couldn't do without these people. But anyway, so that's about that. The jobs would get done. We just would have to go about what we do differently, get away from the capitalist ideas. So what we see with the basic income, and the trials bear this out, albeit at a small level, but more people flourishing. That's what we're kind of aiming for. Fewer people in poverty, more people having the opportunity to flourish. So it doesn't get taken away from you, so you could do part-time work, you could do flexible work. Entrepreneurship is one of the big outcomes seen in the various trials. If people have ideas about what they'd like to do for a business, and we've got some people along today, like Daryl selling his fudge, who've done exactly that, and isn't it lovely that people get the opportunity to do what they love to do what brings you alive. This bit I can't read, that's a really bad colour. Combine it with a real living wage. So as I said, it doesn't stand alone. We should pay people properly for the work they do. And the welfare system remains. There's a lot in the writing about basic income that this isn't a replacement for a welfare state. We will always need that. There will always be people with disabilities, mental health conditions, or some other reason why they cannot work. And we do always need a way to support those people in society. So we will always need a welfare state of some sort. So this isn't a way of replacing it. This is something else. Right, bit of time for you to do discussion. The reason for this Star Trek, quite aside from the fact this was my favourite one, I just adore Patrick Stewart in anything, and this was kind of what I grew up with. But Gene Roddenberry had this utopian idea, and what I love about Star Trek, quite aside from being a bit of a sci-fi nerd anyway, is I'm also a philosopher and interested in philosophy, and this is all about ethics. So much of Star Trek, especially the early one, was an examination of ethics. They don't have money, they're vegan, they have a completely different model of society. So he had a vision about what the world could be like, what the universe could be like, and there's so much in Star Trek that goes beyond the science, the exploration. There's a lot in there, even in the early stuff with Kirk, with his over-dramatic acting, William Shatner. There's a lot of good examination of different ways to live. So what I'd like you to do for a bit, getting away from me talking, is just to have a chat with the people around you. I have put out paper and pens you can use or not as you wish. You can just chat to one another if you want to. But I want you to think, if you were freed up and you didn't have to spend 40 hours or whatever you do going out to work to earn a living, what would you be doing with your time? And if you're retired, so you're not having to do that anyway, well, think back about, when you did have to go out to work. So if you were freed up a bit and you could do whatever brought you alive, what would you spend your time doing? So I'm just going to give you some time to have a chat with one another about that. Off you go. You can scribble on the paper if you want to, or you can just chat. Or buy beer, or whatever. It's good to see lots of conversation going on. I love it. So, what kind of things did you come up with? I saw some people were writing some stuff down. Some people were just having a good chat. So, who wants to share with me some of the stuff you would do if you didn't have to spend all your time earning money?
I sit at a pub on a Friday afternoon listening to a nice talk.
Oh, brilliant! I'd sit in the pub on a Friday listening to a good talk.
I think I might have got that one right, Hans.
Yeah. Gardening, definitely. Oh, there's so much joy to be had in gardening, and so much that we're doing for our little local ecosystems and things. Yeah, gardening's a good one. John?
Growing our own food and tackling the point that you made just a moment ago, and that's like education in the broadest sense and tackling the issues that are not generally covered.
I wonder which issues they might be, John.
Well, we had a bit of a broad discussion and we went right off the tangent, didn't we? About those blind spots in society.
Yeah, and we discussed the Overton window as well, about this being slightly outside the Overton window at the moment and needing to come into the Overton window. We also discussed the Swiss referendum in 2015, the referendum on whether they should roll out universal basic income, and also the trial in Helsinki, 2,000 people in Helsinki. I think it was for over a 2-year period. And they're now analysing that research, and I watched some of the interviews of those people that received it. It was amazing actually to drill down into people's lives and just to see how that had kind of it's transformational for some of those people because it gave them the freedom, it took away anxiety, and we also discussed the point that actually our welfare system. Welfare state costs us an awful lot of money. People always ask, when I talk about universal basic income, they always ask, who's going to pay for it? That is the default, de facto response. And I haven't got a full answer for that, so hopefully you could write it.
I've got a slide about that a bit later on.
But we spend 50% of our welfare budget is spent on administering it. So, deciding who's applicable to receive either pension or universal credit or disability allowance, it costs a lot of money to administer it. And so it wouldn't cost us as much as we think it would cost if everybody was just paid it automatically. We'd take out a whole level of buildings wouldn't be necessary. I mean, it would reduce employment because all those administration staff the mandarins in government administering all this, their job role cease to exist. So they'd be probably lucky and welcome to universal basic income because they wouldn't have a job. But also we talked about the rise of automation in manufacturing and the fact that just in our lifetime, there's not going to be employment for all. We're already seeing 0-hour contracts. We're already seeing a complete shift in the way employment operates with the gig economy?
The gig
economy, that's it, the gig economy. So there's not going to be employment, there's going to be further unemployment because there won't be the jobs there, and then that's going to cost us more money in administering more welfare. So I think it's only a question of time. But it's the Overton window, it's whether people can actually accept.
Completely agree with everything you said as a fellow advocate, obviously, of basic income. And that's something else that's starting to be written about quite a lot, is the AI and what that means for us. And, you know, from my point of view, and I'm sure yours and other advocates of this as well, it should be liberating that we've got automation. It should free us up so that we don't have to do some of those jobs that are rather boring and don't really enrich us, and we are free to do other things. It should be liberating, but it's seen as something to be feared because people will lose their jobs. So, yeah, we do need this complete shift. It's a paradigm shift in how we operate as a society. And, you know, we're on the edge now with everything happening, with climate change and living in that world. We've got to live differently.
Well, it'd be great because most of us could revert to a 3-day week or a 2-day week, or and do more community-based stuff. We could grow our own food, spend more time, and we wouldn't need to commute everywhere. And it brings to my mind what's happened in China since the coronavirus outbreak is that it's virtually wiped out all air pollution, and the air is now clean. And so it has a positive effect when people don't have to commute, you know, and that's the biggest problem, I think, is this urban to urban. It's not necessarily within the city transportation, it's the urban to urban, having to get to the next city to work.
Yeah.
You know, people are spending 3 or 4 more hours a day commuting. So useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Were there any other kind of good things that came out of your conversations? There were some nice things at the table at the back there. I won't name anyone, but I liked the fact that when I asked people what you would do with your time, somebody wrote pranks. Yeah, we like that. I generally just like the idea of more time for being silly. I quite like the idea, more time for being playful and silly and playing pranks on people. I rather like that. But what else did you have?
Read poetry out loud at bus stops.
Oh, fantastic. You need to do that anyway. Don't wait for basic income.
Some of the more serious ones were charity work abroad or teaching more piano and volunteering, working in allotments, travelling, that kind of thing.
Oh my goodness. Can we just have a pause for this amazing dog that's just come in? Look at this. Oh dear. Oh. Oh, heavens.
We've now taken collective ownership of the dog.
The dog is now ours. We own the dog. Oh my goodness, that's a cute dog. Have you got dogs on your paper? Yeah. Be more dog. But yeah, all of those wonderful things. I know on your paper you had writing as well. I always want to write things and I just never get around to it and I'm too tired to do it, and I'd love to be spending more time doing writing. Anybody else had any really good things that they'd be doing if they didn't have to work every hour? Helping out here. Yes. Doing a lot of that, but on top of working.
Yes, if I had more time, I'd do more.
I just find that so much the things that are important to us personally and important to our communities get squeezed around the edges of having to go out and earn a living. And I think it should be the other way around, really. I think we can spend time doing work that contributes to society and puts more money in our pockets, and have free time to do the things we love and the things that contribute and the things that are valuable. So I'm sure we could all think of all sorts of ways that we could be doing that. I mean, that's why I took redundancy a few years ago and why I am now feral, so that I could try to do that. So I work 3 days a week earning money, and then the rest of the time I can do things like this. And, you know, I've got a campaign I'm trying to get going again around the edges of working around poverty, and there's all sorts of other things that I'm involved in. I still find that I've not got as much time as I'd like to, but I look for opportunities to reduce how much I have to work. Right, moving on a bit. This is some of the research. Next few slides come from an event I attended a couple of years ago, run by the London School of Economics, who champion basic income. Quite a lot of economists. Do I keep fading out? It's a cable thing. I'm better off just leaving it in there. Yeah, I like to walk around. I'm not very good at standing still. I like to walk around. I think I'm doing a TED talk or something. The London School of Economics, quite a lot of economists are very pro the idea of basic income because it has so many merits and can actually have a positive effect on the economy. So the London School of Economics sometimes does run events about it, and they ran a whole day about Citizens Basic Income Trust. So some of this there were academics there presenting some of their research. So the next few slides are just a few examples of those. This was from a case in India. Unsurprisingly, the places with the most poverty see the most gains when they trial a basic income. So some of the things here are typical of what you would expect when you start giving people free money. This idea that poor people are feckless and they'll just spend it on drinks and stuff, well, the railway will probably be quite happy about that. Yeah, so what if they do? But it's not what happened anyway. When they did the trial, that's not what happened. You give people free money, they don't necessarily just go straight down the pub. They might do that, and they might do lots of other things too. And it meant, this is what James said, that people were able to make choices about their employment. They couldn't be exploited so readily because they had options. People planned better. There's all sorts of things that you might not necessarily expect. So people were able to manage their money better because they weren't constantly in debt. So you're in a situation where any money coming in goes out again straight away because you're constantly in debt. Now, I've been there. I'm sure lots of people in the room have. When you are in debt, I find it really hard to focus my mind on anything else because I'm so worried about paying the next bill, or whether I'm going to get more charges or fines or anything else. So if you free people up from that, they actually are able to plan ahead, financially plan, save. That can have a great benefit to the economy and also on the welfare state. If people are thinking about managing their own money, they're not needing help from other places. People ate better. This is something that was seen across the trials in countries, especially in the more impoverished countries and areas where they trialled it. People looked after their health better, their family health better. They were eating better food. So that meant they didn't need health services so much because they could look after themselves and their families better. It also had a positive impact on mental health because people are in a more secure position. And you give people that security, they can plan for the future, they have hope for the future, mental health improves. Bit of a no-brainer, really. People borrowed less. Again, it's that kind of alleviating debt. Debt pays big in the UK, as it does across the world. The poorer you are, the more expensive everything gets. And so, I hate all these kind of payday loan companies and everything. Fortunately, some of them have gone bust. But they prey on people that have got no money and charge them extortionate interest rates and things. So they will be very anti the idea of basic income because it's so much more empowering for people. And they even found in their trial in India that people with chronic illness took their medicines better. So there are sometimes some unexpected benefits to these things. If you give, because what you're not just giving people free money, you're giving them that security and you're taking away their worries. And that has all sorts of other benefits. This is an old one that was trialled in Canada in the 70s. It was one of the earlier trials over 5 years. And it's just interesting because of a lot of the trials have been in places like African nations and India and some of the poorer societies. So it's always interesting to see how different things are when they're trialled in the West, where you might expect different culture and a different response. But it was quite interesting. It's not necessarily what you expect. Men worked 1% fewer hours, women worked 3% fewer hours. A lot of the low-paid jobs in societies are done by women, so again, this kind of gives women a lot more choice. married women stayed out of the workforce longer. Now, this was in the 70s, so, you know, that might be slightly different now because women are not necessarily homemakers so much as they might have been back then. But it does mean, again, you've got that choice if you're raising a family, both mum and dad, dad and dad, mum and mum, depending on your family unit. But you will want to spend time with your family. You don't want to be coming home from work and just, you know, the kid's in bed or you've got limited time. So it gives you more time to raise a family or care for elderly relatives and things. Oh, God, why did I use this yellow? Sorry?
Young underprivileged males significantly reduced work effort, but this was followed up. Many of these young men entered further education.
Nice, thank you. Shouldn't have used the yellow. But yeah, they did find, which is, you know, the fear, oh, people just won't bother doing anything. And they did find in this trial, I should use the pointer. I've got a pointer, look. Oh, they did, I haven't done that yet, so I should do the thing. They did find that, yeah, younger men decided, yeah, I'm not going to work, hurrah. However, they did go on to access higher education and do all sorts of other things. So even if it seems that people are just going, yay, free money, and not working, they may well end up doing lots of other things that are beneficial. And hospitalisations fell by 8.5% compared to the control group, mostly due to reduction of injury. And that was interesting as well. People have fewer accidents when they've got more money. Don't know why, but that was another effect they found. And in Namibia, this was a really interesting one, and I'll get to why. They did it slightly differently in Namibia. Rather than a sort of monthly income, they gave people a grant and said, here's some money, do what you want with it. And they found, again, people did the same sort of things. They set up businesses, they looked after their families better. So child malnutrition during the period of the trial vastly reduced because people were feeding their children better. So before the trial, 42% of children in this area of Namibia where they were doing the trial were malnourished. But at the end of the trial, well, just after 6 months, in fact, that's how quickly it can make a difference. That malnourished figure had gone down to only 17%. So within even a short space of time, massive difference to communities. So this was just some of the other positive impacts that this particular study had. So people got more money, largely by generating it themselves. So they had a grant to start with, and a lot of people used it to build up their own small businesses and bringing their own money. So they became self-sustaining. And a lot of the money, this was very important and is seen across trials as well, stays local. People spend it local, so everyone within the community benefits. However, what was really interesting about this researcher's talk at this day that I went to, London School of Economics, was that even though it was going really well, it was stopped by the IMF and the World Bank. And it sounds like a big conspiracy thing, but, you know, this comes from a pretty reliable source, this Dutch researcher who was doing the study over a period of years. And he said it was literally black cars outside the school gates where his kids were going to school. So one does wonder why basic income has never taken off despite the research that suggests it's a good thing. So I found that pretty scary and quite troubling. In whose interest is it to keep people poor? So, yeah, but he sort of finished by saying, we don't really need more experiments. We know that it works and it has many benefits. It's just about how we go about implementing it. But we do need to, the reason I'm doing this talk to you today is we need more people on side because it's going to be met with opposition. I mean, if people like the World Bank can step in and say, cease and desist, you've got some pretty powerful people who look after capitalist interests who would see this as a threat. They shouldn't, because actually economies can thrive with this, because people have more disposable income to spend. But I believe there's so much money in keeping people in debt and keeping people in poverty that there's kind of that lack of will to do it. And I think also there are those whose interest it is to keep people disempowered. it's quite nice to have a workforce you can exploit, being very cynical here, but I think that's the reality. You want to have the workers that do your bidding, whilst other people get to have nice times on their yachts and ruining the planet and stuff. So how do we go about it? How do we practically do it? Because it seems a bit utopian, seems a bit radical, but it goes back to my earlier slide that just because things have always been a certain way doesn't mean they have to. I mean, Malcolm Torrey, who's been looking into this since the 80s, and there's quite a lot online that he's written, he said that it's just about doing taxes differently and maybe thinking about using things like land tax or a carbon tax. The idea of the Robin Hood tax that's been around for a while, which is about putting a tax on, very tiny tax on banks that would generate an awful lot of money. Corporation tax. There are all sorts of ways that money can be found. It's out there. It's just about thinking about how we tax and how we use the money we raise from tax. I mean, we all know that despite this assertion there's no magic money tree, money was found when it needed to be to pay the DUP. So it's always possible. We just need to think about how we use our taxes. Yeah, that slide, even the bit you can't read, is all about, yeah, we can do it, we just need to do the tax stuff. One slide that I remembered as somebody was talking, or one study rather, that I haven't put in here, I can't remember when it was done. Where's James? The one with the homeless people in London. That was about 2010, wasn't it? I think. And that again was a grant as opposed to an income. But they worked with about 45 entrenched rough sleepers who'd been sleeping on the streets, sometimes for more than a decade. And local services had been working with them to try to support them and move them on, and it hadn't really been working, and it was very expensive. So they decided that each of these people would get a grant of £3,000 and a support worker to work with them to say, how will you use this money to improve your situation? And it's a shame that I forgot to include that study because they found that of those rough sleepers, all of them, their situation had improved some way or other. 15 of them were accommodated. Many of them had got themselves into rehab and were addressing their addiction issues. Many of them had reconnected with family because the power was put into their hands. And rather than what should we do to those people, it was a conversation about, we have some money that's for you. We want you to think about how you'll use that. And I know James has been doing some work with local rough sleepers here. And we asked them a similar question. What would you do? And it was things that, again, we might not necessarily think of, like lockers where I can put all my stuff. Because one chap, John, he said, people think you've hit rock bottom. Rough bottom. Yeah, that's nasty. You get cream for that. Nobody wants rough bottom. Do you have a rough bottom? I heard it was soft. I heard it was soft as a baby's. Anyway, I was talking about serious things. He said, you think you've hit rock bottom when you're sleeping rough, but actually rock bottom is when you've lost everything that means something to you, like your photos, letters, books. So he just wanted lockers where things could be put while people were on the streets. So just about empowering people. And actually that particular study saved the local authority that was running it tens of thousands of pounds by giving people money and helping them to think about how to help themselves, because they weren't having to put in all these really costly interventions over years and years and years and years that didn't actually make any difference. They weren't actually moving people on. They were just continually paying out to support people. So although it's not always politically popular, the notion of give people money, there's lots and lots of evidence out there that it works and can save money in the long run. Right, so one of our favourite green warriors. Who knew Arnold Schwarzenegger was going to turn out to be a champion of the world and that? Yeah, he's great, Arnie. So, again, I want you to have a bit of a chat before I do my last little bit. I'm doing for time. I've got loads of time. So I want you to think about now, Again, you may write things if you want to record things, which would be quite nice, because then I'll have something to say, this is what people think we could do. But I want you to think about our local community, perhaps, or broader, and how we influence national policy. How do we make this happen? The evidence is out there. Some of the will is out there. But how do we actually make that shift? How do we begin to change things from how they are now to how we would want them to be? And what role can you play in making that happen? Because it's all very well kind of saying, well, those people ought to do this or ought to do that. What can we in this room do? So I'm just going to give you 10, 15 minutes, and obviously you can use that time to get another beer if you wish, to have a chat to one another based on what we've talked about, to think about what you could do and what we could do to make this a reality.